Hi everyone, and welcome to another one of my positional previews for the 2024 NFL Draft. We're back with the offensive tackles from this year's draft class. I wanted to make sure that we had all the data from the NFL Scouting Combine that finished this weekend. I think it's quite important for some of these tackles. Teams will have particular thresholds that they're looking for these tackles to meet in terms of arm length, weight, size, depending on the role they have for them or want to put them into. So there's a bit of a split between obviously positional priority when it comes to the Rams draft strategy. So they could very well take a tackle in the first round, either at 19, or there's even been some whispers of a potential trade up if there's someone they really like. And interestingly, we have some information about who the Rams have been meeting with so far through the draft process, including at the Combine last week. And that could give us a few clues on what sort of thing they're looking for at the position, and in particular, the specific players that they want to sit down in a room with, get to know, understand how they see the game, and really get into the details of those players in terms of their knowledge of scheme, their personalities, their character, all those things that we know that the Rams front office do care about when they look at draft picks. Interestingly, 4 out of 5 of the top tackles, according to PFF, were all first round picks. More specifically, they were all picked in the first 13 picks of the entire draft. The exception to that was Jordan Mailata from the Eagles. He was a 7th round pick. He was obviously someone who wasn't coming in with a big college resume. He was an international player who had these raw tools and was very much a developmental tackle prospect that has clearly worked out very well for the Philadelphia Eagles, but not quite the same kind of prospect that we're looking at coming out of college is in the 2023 draft, and certainly teams will try and replicate that. He was a 7th round draft pick. Why wouldn't they throw a few darts on players with those kind of raw traits? But for the most part, if you want a top-end tackle, you are going to have to invest proper draft capital into that position. Looking at the top 10 tackles, so expanding it beyond the top 5, again, exception being Jordan Mailata, all the other tackles were taken in the first 3 rounds of the draft, in the top 77 picks. And there are only 2 day 3 picks in the top 20 tackles league-wide, Mailata being one and Zach Tom being the other. Obviously, teams may want to throw a dart on a player who's got raw talent or maybe hasn't had the same opportunities as others, but for the most part, if you're looking to address the position, the first round's the place to look, and failing that, 2nd and 3rd rounds. So that's kind of leading some of my thoughts about which players to look at for the Rams. I don't necessarily think they will go tackle in the first round. I know that would please a lot of people, but looking at the players that are available, potentially available around the 19th pick, I don't know if they will upgrade the left tackle position at that pick point. And obviously there's a few different lines of thinking. Some people might want heir apparent to Rob Havenstein to take over at right tackle, and would be fine with us taking someone who could only play right tackle. But for the most part, I think Rams fans want to see an upgrade to the left tackle position. Alaric Jackson's obviously been an exceptional player for an undrafted free agent, but he is not a top-end left tackle in the league at the moment. So there is an opportunity to upgrade a very important position, and the first round's a good place to do it. All the evidence points to that. So I'm going to be taking you through a few different prospects, 2 prospects that are really considered first round draft picks, and then a couple that I like, that I've not watched a great deal of, but I think have the traits to be someone you add to the roster, just stash at the back end of the roster, develop them as tackle prospects, and just see what they can be. So more of a 5th round, 6th round flyer. If you've been following the draft this year, the first prospect I want to bring up will be a name you potentially heard, particularly after the Combine week. Amarius Mims is a Georgia right tackle. He's taken over the position from Rams' own Warren McClendon, who held down the right tackle spot for a few years. And he is a very interesting player because I think if he had a few years' experience playing in college, at the level that he's been playing when he has been on the field, he would be a comfortable top 10 pick. His biggest problem has been he's not been able to get in the starting lineup, and when he has, he's got injured. This year was meant to be his year to really put on a full year of tape and show what he could do. And unfortunately, he got injured partway through the season. Interestingly, the Rams over the last 5 or so years haven't drafted a single O-lineman who's had less than 35 starts at the college level. And 35 starts is quite a lot. It's more than 3 full seasons. Whereas Mims has had 9 starts, so significantly less than the Rams are usually comfortable with. They usually value experience at the position. He has taken 800 college snaps. As a comparison, that's more than some of these other draft prospects had in 2023. So it's basically a full season of play. And over those snaps, he's given up no sacks, no QB hits. And that's been his entire college career. So he's been very successful when he has been on the field. It's just a case of he doesn't have the resume that other players have. And because of that, he may well be available for the Rams at 19, and they may be able to pick up a player who is really a top 10 talent. So that's the real attractive thing about Mims. He is also an obscenely large player who can move as if he's far, far lighter, far more athletic. He moves really well. The one thing you won't miss about Mims if you've watched him on tape is his size. He is 6'8". He measured in at 340 pounds at the Combine, 36-inch arms and 11-inch hands. He is a massive human being, even lined up next to all these other tackles. And the most amazing thing about that is he moves better than nearly all of them. He is a very, very good athlete. When you watch him on tape, you can tell he's a larger man. He is a little bit more heavy-footed, but it doesn't stop him from being very athletic. It doesn't stop him from playing in a Georgia offense that is very multiple, has those zone blocking plays that need more athleticism as well as a lot of power elements. And that obviously offers a lot of very positive crossover with the Rams' current line and the systems that they're now running since Mike LaFleur became offensive coordinator. So he's a really good scheme fit for the Rams. He's obviously a very impressive athlete in general. The biggest issue is he just doesn't fit the Rams' previous drafting habits. That 9 starts, it just doesn't line up with how they've previously treated this position in past drafts. And that's not to say that won't change. I think over the time, Les Snead has shown the ability to adapt his approach. I think they've learned a few things. Historically, the Rams have always drafted tackles with 34-inch arms or thereabouts. The only exception to that is Alaric Jackson, who was an undrafted free agent. However, he's shown that he can play the position at the NFL level, and so I think that probably, for a sensible front office, that leads you to revisit any assumptions you previously had about who you draft at the position. They're also changing their identity on offense, particularly in the run game. They're looking for these larger tackles instead of, in the past, they might have gone for more athletic 300-pound linemen. Now they're looking at players who are 320 pounds plus, who have got that power element to their game and who can really impose themselves on an opposing defense. So Mims fits that changing identity, and it'll be interesting to see if he's someone that they do take more interest in going into this draft. we know they've met him at the combine, so that obviously points to the fact that they're considering a player like him. They know he's likely to be available at pick 19, and I think he'd be a home run pick. He would be the equivalent of getting a top 10 player. It is just that resume that every team is going to have some question marks over, and side by side, if they like him as much as someone else, they're probably going to go with the guy with more experience. So it'll be very interesting to see where Mims gets picked. But on a talent level, he is one of the best tackles I've seen coming out of college for the last 5 years. That it's as simple as that, and I'm really excited to see him on an NFL field. I'm going to jump into the Amarius Mims tape now, but I will say it is quite frustrating how little he was on the field. He did start against Alabama, and I was really hoping to get some clips of him against Dallas Turner, but he was only on the field for the first quarter and then was replaced, and didn't really have any pass protection snaps against Turner at all, and not even that many against Chris Braswell either. Similarly, didn't start against Missouri, who have a really good defense. So there's no clips from that game. And so there's a lot of games against high quality opposition where he just wasn't really on the field. And so a lot of his snaps are against lesser quality college football teams. And it does kind of skew some of this analysis a little bit. So worth keeping in mind that even though he was on the Georgia team, he wasn't necessarily always playing against the highest quality opposition. So what I've done is I've gone back to the Peach Bowl versus Ohio State from 2022, where he came into the team for Warren McClendon and helped lead Georgia to a national championship. So this is fourth quarter, important series with Georgia behind Ohio State by 11 points. Mims is in at right tackle, number 65. And this one doesn't really go their way, but watch him get up to the second level and just keep driving this linebacker back into the end zone. There he is, and just keeps driving him forward. Next one, again, nothing really goes their way on this play either, but Mims just locks onto his man, uses that length to stop number 8 getting his hands anywhere near his chest, and just fends him off. Again, falls incomplete. Stetson Bennett in a quarterback. And then this final one's the most impressive one. This is against JT Tuamalo, who could have been a first round pick this year if he had come out into the draft, but he's going back to Ohio State for another year. Tries to beat Mims around the edge, get up high around the pocket, swat his arm away. Mims just locks on with those arms, uses his frame to great effect, and just takes advantage of that physical advantage he has over pass rushers. Leads him all the way around the quarterback, completely safe pocket. And that's the sort of variety of plays that Mims can achieve when he's on the field. Obviously, the most frustrating thing is that he was on and off the field during games, let alone throughout the season. And a lot of teams are going to be concerned about that, have some worries about whether he's really going to be someone who can stay healthy. He's not shown that he can in the past. And so if you're investing a first round pick, you might have a bit of hesitance there. Another player who is projected to be a first round draft pick, who has spoken to the Rams at the combine as well, is Taliese Fuaga from Oregon State. Like Mims, he has been playing at right tackle for Oregon State. There are quite a few of these top-end tackles who have been playing on the right-hand side rather than the left, which is interesting this year. He's 6'6", he's 324 pounds. So again, fits that changing size profile, which is perfect for the Rams in their current scheme. His arm length came in at about 33 inches, so a little bit lower than that 34-inch threshold that a lot of teams will look for. There was some talk about whether he could play inside, but he's just so intelligent in how he deals with edge rushers and how he moves that I think it would be a waste moving him inside. he can be a very, very good right tackle at the next level. And I think a few people really wanted to see him on the left-hand side. He didn't take snaps on the left at the Senior Bowl, which is a bit disappointing for some people, but maybe he knows his limits. Maybe he just knows that he's got that comfort level on the right and he doesn't want to put on worse tape in Senior Bowl practices when he knows he can stay on the right-hand side and dominate. I believe that Fuaga was PFF's top-rated tackle in college last year. He had an 88.2 overall grade and didn't give up any sacks in 28 college starts, over 1,500 snaps, which is basically double the amount of college snaps that Amarius Mims took. So again, if you're tiering these two guys at the same level, you're probably going to choose Fuaga over Mims. And there is a question of whether Fuaga's going to be available to the Rams when they come to pick. A lot of rumours coming out of the combine where the New York Jets are very, very interested in Fuaga. So he could well be taken at pick number 10 and won't even cross the Rams' minds when it comes to draft day. Obviously, post-free agency for the Rams, they are purely looking for tackles now. They've really solidified the interior of their offensive line, and someone like Fuaga is an interesting case study for them because some teams apparently see Fuaga as being better suited to play at right guard rather than right tackle in the NFL. And for the Rams, that obviously wouldn't be an interest to them. They've got Kevin Dotson signed up there at right guard for the next 3 years, and he's not a player they're necessarily going to move around. He struggled on the left side of the line in Pittsburgh, so he's pretty much locked into that right guard spot. So someone like Fuaga, who, if the Rams drafted him, either would need to show that he could play left tackle and compete with that spot with Alaric Jackson, or he's just going to have to sit behind Dotson and Havenstein until his opportunity comes round. And that makes him less and less likely to be someone that the Rams might draft. And for that reason, I just wanted to pick out some of Fuaga's bad tape. There's not a lot of it. He's a very adept right tackle, but there are some tendencies that concern me, which make me think that maybe he isn't a perfect fit for the Rams compared to some of these other tackles. The first one I want to show is from the Oregon State game against Arizona. Taylor Upshaw, who is quite an underrated edge rusher, not the most athletic player, but certainly a talented edge rusher who could get drafted this year, is rushing on the left-hand side of the pass rush. So Fuaga's side. And you'll see that Fuaga doesn't even look his way on this sack. And PFF haven't credited Fuaga with the sack conceded here. So presumably they think that this wide receiver should be maybe chipping the edge rusher, getting a block in before he runs on his route. But I'm not sure that's true. It seems very much like he's an intended receiver on this play to me, and therefore Fuaga needs to be aware of the guy on the edge. And instead, Fuaga just looks inside and helps his guard block the defensive tackle. The guard then moves, then helps pick up the guy on the other side of him, and the whole line just doesn't do its job of blocking a four-man rush. Everyone's running in the wrong direction, and there's a sack. So these are the sort of plays that we need to think about when we're looking at stats. No sacks conceded. Well, I think that one's on Fuaga personally. We don't know what he's been coached, we don't know what he's been told, but to me, he needs to be aware of what's on the outside shoulder. And that outside shoulder's interesting with Fuaga, because there's a lot of plays where people have won against him and created pressure by having a speed rush on the outside, really stretching him up the field, and he doesn't seem comfortable with it on occasion. This is one, it's a 2-point attempt against UCLA. UCLA had a really good pass rush last year. Latu is obviously the headline player, but they had Gabriel Murphy and a few others who were all very productive pass rushers. And on this play, you've got Murphy up against Fuaga, and he just beats him with speed on the outside. Fuaga can't recover in time, hasn't got the arm length to really keep contact and get his feet back underneath him. And they almost have a fluky 2-point conversion, but he drops the pass. But it's that sort of play where you see Fuaga get beat. There's another one here from the same game, same drive, I believe. And again, just beaten around the edge. He recovers okay there, but it puts the QB under pressure and affects the play. Falls incomplete in the end zone. He did some really good things in this game too, particularly against Latu. Here's one where just gets enough of a push on Latu to open up the run. You know, it's best on best, and he just gets that movement that he needs, drives him backwards. He's a very quick mover in the run game, really impressive, gets out of his stance very quickly, gets upfield very quickly, sometimes struggles to get on the landmarks with his hands. I think sometimes he's just doing everything too fast, but he's certainly got the ability to be a very effective run blocker. There's another one against Latu. This one's pass protection. Latu tries to beat him with some clever hand play, and he just recovers straight away, gets his hands back on Latu, doesn't even concede any ground. Safe pocket for the quarterback to make the pass. Touchdown. I do think this whole thing on his outside shoulder is a weakness that the Rams might pay attention to, and it's certainly why I think teams are considering him as a very, very good interior lineman, and maybe a bit more hesitant about bringing him in as a tackle, which obviously affects whether the Rams will draft him or not. I mentioned this on the Edge Rusher video. Brennan Jackson, number 80, Washington State, had a really fun game against him. Very back and forth. Brennan Jackson said in an interview recently with Downtown Rams that Fuaga was the best player he went up against in college. And you can see why on the tape. He really went at Fuaga snap after snap, and Fuaga was equal to the challenge. But there are a few good plays that Brennan Jackson had in this game, rushing on the left-hand side. And we don't know if his coaches have said, you all have to sell this zone run play. It's play action. You all need to get moving to the left so the quarterback can run out to the right-hand side and try and make the pass, which obviously fails terribly. Brennan Jackson's not fooled at all. And again, we don't know if Fuaga should have chipped him, but he just turns away and ignores the problem. Maybe that's coaching, maybe that's Fuaga. And so I think we need to keep that in mind when we're thinking about whether Fuaga's a fit for the Rams. Of course, they could see him as someone who can play left tackle, and therefore they would be interested. But he's solely played on the right throughout his career at Oregon State. He didn't take any snaps at left tackle at the Senior Bowl, and I do just question whether he has any comfort level on the left at all. I think for me, he's a good right tackle and would be an elite right guard in the league. And that's not necessarily what the Rams need to look for right now. Maybe they're looking ahead at Rob Havenstein's potential retirement, but there's so many more significant needs on the Rams roster right now that if you're going to invest your only first round draft pick in 8 years, you're probably not doing it as an insurance for your right tackle. So I really like Fuaga as a player. I'm not necessarily sure that the Rams are going to go in that direction in this draft. But for me, I don't think this is the year that the Rams take a tackle in the first round. And because of that, these next two prospects are potentially more interesting to me. Not surprised that they're showing up on people's radars more and more as they go through the draft process. The first of those is Christian Jones. And he is very much the opposite of Mims. He's played in 60 games in college, been there for 6 years, a 48 game starter. So he has heaps and heaps of experience, and that's what the Rams love. We know it from their drafting over the last 5 years. They love these guys who have put up full season after full season of snaps on college offensive lines. He played for Texas at both left and right tackle, and just make a note of that for now, but I'll come back to it. The last few seasons he's played at right tackle, and every year his comfort level has grown, and it's been really obvious that he's just got better and better the more time he spent on the right hand side. I feel like he proved a lot of people wrong in those Senior Bowl practices, particularly the 1v1s against different draft prospects of different pass rush plans, different abilities, different weights, arm lengths, and he held up really, really well, won nearly every single rep he took. He outplayed players like Tyler Guyton, Patrick Paul, players who are being seen as better prospects than him and likely to go earlier in the second round or even the first round. Jones isn't the best athlete out of this group. He relies a lot more on his size and length. He's 6'5". He's got over 34-inch arms, 10.5-inch hands, and he's about 305 pounds, so a bit lighter, maybe more of an outside zone fit, but he has a power element, just uses his body really well, maximizes his frame, and deals with speed and power very well. He's just really proficient, particularly on his 2023 tape. As I mentioned before, he was listed as the starter for Texas at left tackle a few years back, and he's admitted himself in pre-draft interviews he just doesn't have a comfort level playing on the left. He very much sees himself as a future right tackle in the NFL, and it's obviously admirable honesty. A lot of these players kind of come in with some bravado and say that they can play wherever they're needed, but I think it shows good self-awareness that he recognises he wasn't at his best on the left. His comfort level's on the right. That's where he wants teams to play him. So if the Rams are looking at him, it's going to be as a replacement for Rob Havenstein in the future. He could play inside a guard in the meantime if they need him to, but I definitely see him as that future right tackle prospect. So the Rams probably aren't going to be looking at taking him in their first few picks. It's probably more of a third round pick than anything else. That said, I think he is a quintessential Rams draft pick. He's got all of that experience in college, and when you hear him in interviews, he's just a high character guy who is really committed to his craft, and I just think he fits in really well with the kind of model of player that the Rams have continued to invest in, continue to bring into their ecosystem, as Sean McVay would say. And everything I see about Jones, it just strikes me that he's got that Rams mentality that I think will shine through in any draft interviews he has with them, any background research they do on him. Obviously, if the Rams want a left tackle upgrade, this isn't the guy. So, for example, it was 2021, he was the left tackle at Texas and was in and out of the team because of his performance. He gave up 4 sacks that season, PFF pass blocking grade of 48.3, which pales in comparison to his stats at right tackle, particularly over the last season. He's just not a left tackle prospect. And if that's what the Rams are looking for, they may pass over him for that reason. But I just think he would be a perfect fit on the Rams, a perfect future right tackle, and gives that advanced plan for that continuity at the position. Obviously, the factor that we can't account for here is what the Rams think of the guys already on their roster, particularly Warren McClendon, who I saw as being brought in as that developmental tackle prospect last year. So it may be that they have a lot more faith in McClendon or someone like AJ Arcuri than we really know about, but if they want to bring someone who can compete for the right tackle position, Christian Jones would be a really solid option in my mind. For Christian Jones, let's do something a little bit different and look at some of his plays at the Senior Bowl. We know the Rams go to the Senior Bowl and take a lot of interest in how players perform against their peers there. They've drafted a lot of players who have had great Senior Bowl appearances over the last few years. And Chris Jones is no exception to that. He had a very good Senior Bowl, I think turned a lot of heads. Here's one of his reps in the one-on-ones versus Darius Robinson, who could well be a first-round draft pick, back end of the first round, Missouri edge rusher. Robinson tries him a few different times here, and Jones just leads him around the pocket in a complete circle almost. Doesn't let him past him at all. Shows some really good footwork here, resetting his anchor point. Keeps his hands in Robinson's chest and just doesn't let him get any leverage on him. Another good couple of clips here from the Senior Bowl as well. This one's Jones against Chris Braswell, the edge rusher out of Alabama, expected to be a second-round draft pick. And he just absolutely stonewalls him on that one. And then you've got Cedric Johnson from Ole Miss. Again, just uses those arms and strength to keep him away. Another one versus Braswell. Gets beaten on the second move a bit there. And then these are on the 11 on 11s. Just does enough to create some space for the runner. Drives his man forward. A few more here. He seems to be blocking his man from around the back of his tight end there. Just as I said, uses his frame to great advantage. He's not the most athletic, most nimble right tackle, but he's got such good skill set and has really developed his way of using that to great effect. This clip of Jones is from the game against Alabama. It's not the most groundbreaking play in the world, but obviously follows his man onto the interior and then knows he's got to pick up the stunt going around the side. Just quite an experienced play from the right tackle there. First he's blocking in Boygby, comes out, gets the nose tackle, as the make a completion. Finding a player like Jones in maybe the third round who can just solidify your right tackle position for the next 5-10 years would be an excellent pickup for the Rams, particularly with Havenstein getting into his 30s, getting younger at the position, getting cheaper at the position too. I think Jones could be a really nice fit for the Rams if they're happy to invest that pick. I think if the Rams want him, they're going to have to use one of their third round picks to get him. It may be that they've got more pressing needs on defense and those picks have to go elsewhere, but if not, I think he could be a great addition. Looking deeper into this draft class, there are a few tackle prospects that I really like. One of whom I mentioned, Garrett Greenfield. He's on my East-West Shrine Bowl video, so I won't go back over him. One of those players is Josiah Ezirim. He plays for Eastern Kentucky and really good measurables, 6'6", 320 pounds. He measured with 35-inch arms, 10 3/4-inch hands, so just a big tackle. Graded out really well via PFF as well, 84.7 overall, and didn't give up a sack or a QB hit in 2023. You may think Eastern Kentucky won't be playing quality opposition week in, week out, and that is correct, but they did have a few games against some SEC teams such as Kentucky, so he's tested out his abilities against those teams and obviously hasn't given up any sacks or QB hits in those games. He's a 2-year starter in total. He's had nearly 1,400 snaps, all at right tackle, except for one snap, oddly. His worst game probably was the Kentucky game in terms of PFF grade, so that obviously has to be noted. But he's someone who was a defensive tackle previously and has been converted to the offensive tackle position, and certainly on 2 years worth of play at that position the returns have been very good. So I think he's got a bit more upside than some of these other later round prospects who've maybe been playing in college for 4 or 5 years and are pretty much at the same level as he is now. So I really like him as kind of one of those upside prospects. Bring them in, stash them on the roster and develop them for a year or two and see what they can become. And maybe for the Rams that makes more sense than some of these higher draft picks if they're looking at a succession plan beyond Amarius Jackson, Joe Noteboom and Rob Havenstein's contracts. So he's the sort of person that I could see them liking on day 3 and might fit their kind of timeline and team build. Here's one of his plays from the Kentucky game really early in the first quarter, and one of the things that the Rams have commented on, particularly since Amarius Jackson was very successful for them as an undrafted free agent, is the value they place on tackle's ability just to keep a guy blocked. It doesn't necessarily need to be the prettiest thing in the world. You've just got to show that you can keep yourself between your man you're blocking and your quarterback. And that obviously has value. It's nice to see when players are playing with a sort of refined technique and doing everything by the book. But one of the things that sets Ezirim apart from me is just his determination. He plays from whistle to whistle and just keeps going even in the face of adversity. This play epitomizes that ability just to play from whistle to whistle and the determination, just keep your hands on your man, not give up on the play, trust that the quarterback's already made the throw when you can't see behind you. And you see Ezirim against number 13, stops him from going outside, almost gets his body twisted, but manages to get his feet back under him and drive his man forward. Quarterback sees it, runs around the outside and runs him for a touchdown. And you see that from him snap in, snap out. Another player in the late rounds with kind of a similar profile to Ezirim is Travis Glover from Georgia State. And he was a surprise addition to the Senior Bowl roster, joined partway through the Senior Bowl practices actually, replacing Jeremy Flax from Kentucky. He really impressed in quite a limited showing at the Senior Bowl. I really liked how he just stepped onto the field and competed against all these players from big divisions who had obviously much greater pedigree than he had, and he really looked the part. Like Ezirim, he's 6'6", 327 pounds. He wasn't invited to the combine, so it'll be interesting to see some of his testing at this pro day, which is on Monday the 18th of March, so coming up. And he's got a bit of experience at guard too, so maybe a bit more flexibility. Could be one of those swing tackle players who you can have on the back end of the roster and trust that they can come in a few different positions, which you can't say of Josh Ezirim. But most of his players come at left tackle, which is obviously the position where there's the greatest question mark for the Rams. He played against LSU, played against North Carolina over the last 2 seasons and had really good games. So similarly to Josh Ezirim, he has competed against decent teams and still looked the part. And obviously the Senior Bowl plays into that analysis that he can just go one-on-one against some of these players and still win and impress. So Travis Glover's another one that I definitely keep my eyes on. Here's just some snaps for Glover from their game against LSU this year. He's at left tackle, number 52. Just some solid pass protection to start with. Gets driven out back a little bit, but keeps his shoulders balanced. This one, good run block play, twists his man around, opens up a big hole for number 23 to run in for the touchdown. Then later in the same game, it's already got away from this point, but just really good technique from Glover. Great use of hands, uses that big frame to great effect to keep his man in front of him. Pass rush gets to the quarterback from the other side, but yeah, not on Glover. Does a great job. Thank you for watching this positional video for the 2024 NFL Draft. If you like the content, please do like and subscribe. We will be back every single week with a different position group all the way up until the NFL Draft. And please, keep in touch for any Rams Draft content. You can find me on Twitter at JTPearsonNFL. Thanks a lot, guys. See you soon.